I'm glad to see so many people here tonight. Glad to see a number of students. My students are here as well. We're going to give this lecturer, who's come to us from Boston College, our very, very best attention. I'm really happy to have you here with us. I am now delighted to welcome the newly appointed Aloysius P. Kelly, S.J. Chair in Catholic Studies, Professor John Thiel, to introduce tonight's lecturer and speaker. Congratulations, John. We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Dr. Hosffman Ospino, who will deliver the 30th annual Christopher F. Mooney S.J. Lecture in Theology, Religion, and Society. Father Mooney, for whom this lecture is named, served as academic vice president and professor of religious studies here at Fairfield University from 1980 until his untimely death in 1993. Father Mooney was an internationally recognized theologian who wrote on the spiritual thought of Teilhard de Chardin, on theology and law, and on theology and science. We are fortunate to have with us today a scholar of Dr. Ospino's stature delivering this lecture, which remembers and celebrates Father Mooney's legacy here at Fairfield University. Dr. Ospino earned his doctorate in theology and education at Boston College and currently is Associate Professor of Theology and Religious Education at Boston College's School of Theology and Ministry. He is a notable authority, arguably the most noted authority, on the Latinx Catholic experience in the United States. His remarkable achievement has been recognized in the conferral of a slew of awards, among them the Virgil Elizondo Award, given by the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians in the United States in 2018 for distinguished achievement in theology, and the Cardinal Cushing Medal for the advancement of church research, awarded in 2021 by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. Professor Ospino is a tireless researcher. He is the author of 19 books, and more than 240 articles, book chapters, and essays, writings that he has published in both Spanish and English. Among his books are La Iglesia, Pueblo de Dios llamado a la comunión, published in 2018, and Called to Witness Hope, the Ministry of the Catechist, published just this year in 2023. He served as president of the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians in the United States, otherwise known as ACTUS, in 2021-22, and since 2018 he has served as secretary of the Catholic Theological Society of America. Were I to catalog even a modest fraction of Professor Ospino's many contributions to the Academy and the Church, your patience for his talk would be sorely tested. So let us welcome Professor Ospino, whose title for this afternoon is The American Catholic Experience, Lessons from Spaces in Creative Tension.
Thank you, John, for such a wonderful and generous introduction. You make me sound important. No, it's just, well, thank you very much. No, this is one of the youngest audiences that I have had. I mean, it's just like everybody here under 25, most likely. So that's just great. So it is a true pleasure to be with you this afternoon, evening, and as Professor Thiel has indicated, the title of my lecture is The American Catholic Experience, Lessons from Spaces in Creative Tension. I want to first express my gratitude to Dr. Nancy Delaval director of the Center for Catholic Studies here at Fairfield University, for the invitation to deliver this Father Mooney lecture here at the university. I'm also grateful for the support that I have received in preparing this presentation, the administrators, and all the people who have been encouraging to know in the days before today. I'm going to divide my lecture, but I want to call it more a reflection, mindful that we have here students and pastoral leaders. We have members of the faculty. We have people who are interested in the church, in Catholicism, where we are going, what's happening, how can we interpret the many changes of Catholicism today. And I want to divide this lecture reflection in 3 moments. Moment number 1, I'm going to spend some time looking at historical dynamics associated with Catholicism in the United States since the 19th century until about the middle of the 20th century. The only way for us to fully understand the changes, the dynamics that are taking place today is if we look back, at least a century and a half, 2 centuries, to see where we are located, what happened then, and when we say change, then we need to understand the type of change that is occurring. Then the second part of what we'll do is we'll stop that, at that moment. I will invite you, we're going to do an exercise of interaction among ourselves. Then I will continue with the second part of the lecture, and we're going to look at today. What does it mean to be a culturally diverse church? What are the challenges? What are the questions that are emerging? And I will share with you a few case studies, emerging from research that either I have conducted or research that colleagues of mine have conducted in collaboration, or that or other dynamics that we will see emerging from contemporary history. We'll do the exercise once again, and then we'll come back to the third part, which will deal with a reflection. We'll offer a reflection that I want to call Becoming American Catholic Again in Spaces That Are Old and New. And in this third part, I will reflect from a practical theological perspective, what does it mean to live in tension in spaces where Catholic life is flourishing these days, as alternative to models that might have worked in the past, may not be working today in the same ways as they did, but spaces where people are being creative in a fascinating way. Okay? Does that sound like a plan? Very good. So the educator in me, always wants to give people a little bit of a roadmap, in terms of what you should be expecting. So let me begin with an assertion here. Catholicism in the United States of America has always been an immigrant religion in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, the first Catholics in the United States of America were Hispanic. The first Catholics in the United States of America who came to what today is this nation arrived from Spain, settled down in the Florida Peninsula, and some of them actually settled down in Puerto Rico. So these Catholics lived in this country almost 2 centuries before the United States of America became a nation. Later on, the next wave of Catholics that we would see arriving in this country will have a French background. So we have this Latino Hispanic stream. We got a French stream coming from the north through Canada, or what today is Canada. And we'll have also the Anglophone versions or expressions of Catholicism in the United States. By the year 1800, there were about 400,000 Catholics in the new nation. Only one diocese, the Diocese of Baltimore. And in the Diocese of Baltimore encompassed the entire country, and it was a community that was struggling in a space where they were being treated as foreigners or as antithetical to the Protestant establishment. These 400,000 Catholics were organized in small communities. Give or take, there were about 400 parishes or communities that welcomed these people, where they celebrated their sacraments, where they were initiated in their faith, and where they reflected about who they were as Catholics. Something happened in the 1800s. Towards the 1830s, a large number of immigrants from Ireland started arriving in the United States of America, and they start settling in the Northeast and the Midwest of the United States primarily. By the way, that's one of my complaints. They could have settled in Florida, and most of the structures of the Catholic Church most likely would be there. In any case, so these immigrants start settling through different waves. Start settling in the Northeast and in the South, followed by immigrants from other parts of Europe. Germany, Italy, later on Poland, Portugal, and a few other countries. When these immigrants arrived in the United States of America, they find themselves with the reality that Catholicism is not an established religion. Catholicism, as a matter of fact, is treated and is perceived as a foreign experience, as a foreign religion. When they want to go to church, there are no churches. When they need schools, there are not schools for their children. So these immigrants eventually start developing one of the largest networks of Catholic parishes in the entire world. Between the year 1800 and the year 1900, in a span of 100 years, the number of Catholics in the United States of America went from 400,000 to 16 million. That required the development of a new infrastructure. And that infrastructure was devised primarily through the building of parish networks. The Irish built beautiful churches throughout the country: Northeast, Midwest, South, West. So did the Germans, although primarily focused in the West and the Midwest. The Italians did not want to stay behind. They also built churches. The Polish built churches. The Portuguese built churches. With one characteristic: all these churches were built by the Polish for the Polish, by the Irish for the Irish, by the Italians for the Italians, by the Portuguese for the Portuguese. Welcome to the world of national churches or national parishes. National parishes. These national parishes served as enclaves of Catholic life for most of these immigrants. Catholicism in the 19th century did not have to adapt to previous forms of Catholicism. it had to adapt to a Protestant establishment, yet Catholics managed to survive, adjust to the new land by building these communities. In these national parishes, they practice their own languages. In these national parishes, they receive the sacraments. In these national parishes, they practice cultural activities that were familiar to them. If we want to be more exact in our understanding of what happened at that particular point, what we need to say is that European Catholics and their children transplanted Catholicism from Europe to the Americas or to North America. So in an Irish parish, we had Catholicism as if we were in Ireland, in an Italian parish as if we were in Italy. These parishes gave life to people, and they helped the immigrant community to adjust to the new land. They were oases of parish life, Catholic life, and cultural life. By the second generation, many of their children of these immigrants began to speak primarily English, and they became a process of enculturation, which is a term that actually was coined in the middle of the 20th century. But they began a process of integration. Others call it a process of assimilation into the culture. 16 million Catholics were, by the end of the 18th century, were wrestling with one of the most important questions that Catholics have asked in the history of this nation. And that is, what should we do? American or Catholic? Big question. That's a question that permeated many conversations, many writings at the end of the 19th century and for most of the first half of the 20th century. American or Catholic? Some argued that Catholics in the United States of America should be more Catholic, expressing faithfulness to Rome and remaining faithful to their tradition, doctrine, and practices. Others decided that in order to make it in the United States of America and to be integrated in the United States of America, they needed to be more American. That meant leaving behind languages that were not English, leaving behind practices that may be considered non-American or anti-American, and ultimately becoming engaged in social, political, and economic life in the United States. It was a major dilemma that eventually will be resolved. And as good Catholics, by the middle of the 20th century, they decided that they would be both American and Catholic. Let me get back for one more moment to the 19th century. Towards the middle of the 19th century, second part of the 19th century, on average, Catholic families would have 7, 8 children. It was a time, and I jokingly say, that when there was no television or Facebook or Instagram or the internet, So large Catholic families settling in the United States of America, and there was not a well-formed public school system in most parts of the United States of America. So Catholics go to their bishops, they go to their communities and ask their pastors, we need a place to educate our children. Pastors did not have the money to build schools. Pastors did not have much of an idea of how to respond to this question. In the 1880s, the Third Plenary Council of Baltimore does something that for many, historically, would have been the unthinkable. It required every parish in the United States of America to consider building a Catholic school. As you might imagine, some pastors said, no way, we can't do that. But in the end, 55% of all Catholic parishes in this country ended up building a Catholic school, whether elementary or secondary level. Okay? So by the middle of the 20th century, if you pull this history together, by the middle of the 20th century, American Catholics, or Euro-American Catholics primarily, had built more than 21,000 Catholic parishes nationwide. Only 2 countries rivaled the United States of America in the number of Catholic parishes: Italy and Spain. Not only that, Euro-American Catholics built the largest network of Catholic elementary and secondary schools in the history of Catholicism. More than 13,000 Catholic schools nationwide. Besides that, American Catholics, or to be more exact, Euro-American Catholics, built the largest network of Catholic colleges and universities in one nation. More than 300 colleges and universities nationwide. By the middle of the 20th century, there were more than 150,000 vowed religious women in the United States of America. Most of them were the product of Catholic schools. More than 59,000 Catholic priests in this country. It was a boom. More than 59 priests in the country, most of them the product of Catholic education, Catholic schools. At the same time, Catholics built one of the largest networks of social services in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, the second largest network of social services in this country, only second to the US government. So if we were to put this history or short history together, we can say that American Catholicism, or Euro-American Catholicism, was a history of success. History of success in the process of becoming American and Catholic. By the middle of the 20th century, we have then a community that is thriving, that is growing, that is highly influential. And perhaps the election of J.F. Kennedy as President of the United States of America would signal the arrival of Catholics in this society, and now they become one of the most influential groups, religious groups in the country, and the largest church in the United States of America. The large networks of Catholic infrastructure that Euro-American Catholics built in the 19th century and the first part of the 20th century would be challenged towards the middle of the 20th century by a significant number of dynamics. One of those dynamics is the rise of the multicultural parish. White Catholics, whether Irish, Italian, German, Polish, Polish, did little to interact with certain groups of Catholics, particularly if they were Black or Asian or Hispanic. The large network of Catholic parishes in the United States of America emerged primarily as a segregated network of faith communities. The only way for black Catholics to have a space where they would have, where they could worship and be welcomed into a Catholic community was the black Catholic parish. It was only until the 1940s when dioceses in this country began to desegregate, and so where parishes followed the move. But desegregation did not mean integration. Desegregation in most Catholic parishes in this country was actually the equivalent to tolerance. Black Catholics or Hispanic Catholics or Asian Catholics or even Native American Catholics were tolerated in certain spaces within the temple, within the church, but they were not fully integrated. The idea of a black priest or a Hispanic priest or an Asian priest serving these communities was not even considered. Prior to the 1940s, no Catholic seminary in the United States of America accepted a black man discerning a vocation to the priest. In the 19th century, no religious order in this country accepted black women, or in many cases Hispanic women, to be part of their communities. After World War II, the church in the United States of America begins a process, an accelerated process of integration into the larger culture. That process of integration meant returning to the question, what should we be, American or Catholic? As many Catholics broke away from the Catholic ghetto or the Catholic enclave, many joined suburban neighborhoods. Many started working in settings where Catholic life did not prevail, and therefore parishes were forced to consider alternatives of communities that were serving them. We know that after World War II, in New York, Baltimore, Washington, Boston, Chicago, St. Louis, among other cities, Catholic parishes began to merge the ministries to the Latino community with ministries that were predominantly geared towards the white community. Today, 40% of all parishes in the United States of America serve Catholics in more than one language besides English. 40%, okay? So these parishes became the paradigm of Catholic life in today's communities. From segregation, we moved to mergers, but those mergers were not easy. Hispanic Catholics, for instance, were welcomed, but in the basement churches. They were welcomed in satellite spaces. Their leaders were not recognized as sufficiently capable to lead entire communities. It was rare to encounter a Hispanic pastor or a black pastor in a parish community that was multicultural. St. Patrick Parish in Lawrence, Massachusetts, was established in 1870 as an Irish parish. This was a community that served Irish immigrants and eventually their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, helping them to settle into what would be one of the most fascinating experiences in the Northeast. St. Patrick Parish was surrounded by 13 other Catholic parishes in the same city. And history of the parish tells that in the 1920s and 30s, the pastor prohibited families to send their children to the French Catholic school. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the city where St. Patrick Parish is located had become a mostly Hispanic city. Catholic population, Hispanic population that in the middle of the 20th century was barely 20%, at the beginning of the 2000s was about 70% Hispanic. St. Patrick Parish had to do something, and it became a multicultural parish. There was resistance. Many white Catholic parishioners left. Others said that they would not go to bilingual masses. Others developed, actually, conspiracy theories, like Edna, who argued that Hispanics decide to speak Spanish, so she doesn't understand what they are talking about. The Irish parish becomes a bilingual community officially in 2001. In 2004, St. Patrick Parish becomes a trilingual community. Vietnamese is added to this service. What's interesting is that the pastors that are named in these communities do not speak either Vietnamese or Spanish. So now we find ourselves before a model of community that is trilingual, tricultural, with a leadership that does not fully reflect the demographics, the culture, and the religious tradition of the parishioners. Our Lady of the Angels in Roxbury, Massachusetts, was established in 1906. Our Lady of the Angels is a community established in Roxbury, a community traditionally known for welcoming and serving and housing Black people. It is located in the famous Eaglestone Square, which Professor Susan Bigelow from Emory University calls an urban borderland. Professor Bigelow wrote a book precisely on this particular community called People Get Ready: Ritual, Solidarity, and Lived Ecclesiology in Catholic Roxbury. St. Mary of the Angels is an urban borderland insofar as it is a community that is racially diverse, religious, culturally, socioeconomic diverse. This community struggled significantly with poverty, with lack of resources, and many tensions, not only within the community itself in defining leadership, but also in the context of an urban setting. In the early 1970s, Our Lady of the Angels was struggling in the middle of its neighborhood with bouts of violence, gang activity, violence that emerged from drug dealing, violence that emerged in light of an abandoned urban space. The community felt the need to respond, not only through community organizing, which they did, not only by preaching against violence, which they did, but by ritualizing calls for justice. Every year during Lent, the community had a way of the cross, as the stations of the cross throughout the neighborhood. One day, as the organizers began to define the stations for the ritual, it occurred to them that instead of selecting random spaces, they would go and stop in the spots where people, the places where people had experimented some type of violence. People getting hurt, people being murdered, people being mistreated. And so they did. From then on, every year, they celebrate the Stations of the Cross intimately connected to a call for justice. They turn the entire neighborhood into an extension of their parish, 1972, Father Virgilio Elizondo, San Antonio, Texas, is a diocesan priest, and he met with his bishop and argued that the Latinos in San Antonio were not receiving the appropriate care that they deserved. Hispanic priests at the time were not appointed as pastors, and if they were appointed as pastors, they would be appointed to communities with few resources and with few support, little support. In 1972, Father Virgilio Elizondo requests permission to establish the Mexican American Cultural Center, MAC. The Mexican American Cultural Center became a hub to study the Hispanic Catholic experience through the lens of Hispanics themselves. Hispanic Catholics began to reflect about what does it mean to be American, Catholic, and Hispanic? What does it mean to do theology through Hispanic lenses? It was at the Mexican American Catholic College where the first ever classes in theology from a Latino, Latina, Hispanic perspective were offered in the United States of America, Latino Catholic. It was at the Mexican American Catholic Center where priests, vowed religious women, and lay leaders became fluent in Spanish and received the intercultural competencies to work with the Latino community. So these new voices that are now settling in the United States of America's Catholic Church are settling in spaces that they did not build, or that if they inherited, are now reimagining in order to serve the people that are giving life to Catholics in the country. Today, in the United States of America, 43% of all Catholics self-identify as Hispanic. 5% of Catholics self-identify as Asian and Pacific Islander. 3.9% of Catholics self-identify as Black. And when we say Black, we need to keep in mind that we are talking about 50% African American and 50% of them being immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean. It is spaces like St. Patrick Parish, Our Lady of the Angels Parish, and the Mexican American Catholic Center, which became a college in 2008, where millions of Roman Catholics today are negotiating identities in a culturally diverse church. Their experiences as Latinos, as Black, as Asian, as Pacific Islander, as Native American, and yes, as white, are coinciding in the heart of the parish. In these communities, we see the rise of new leaders that are bilingual, multilingual. We see the rise of councils that parallel traditional parish councils and yet focus on the needs of the specific communities. It is in these communities where we are seeing in the Catholic Church the rise of a reconfiguration of pastoral theological concerns. One of those concerns is a renewed attention to social issues, not much through the lens of advocacy, which is important, but through the lens of survival. Well, let me bring this home. Becoming American Catholic, again, in spaces old and new. American Catholics welcomed the 21st century amidst a myriad of transitions. Many of these transitions have been fast, others unexpected, others received with a sense of surprise. Let me mention a few of these. The scandal of sexual abuse of children by clergy and other pastoral leaders was clearly a self-inflicted wound. It was a combination of clericalism, mismanagement, complacency, common sense. Yes, abusing children is bad, and the inability to recognize sin and evil. Besides that scandal, the decline of the white Euro-American Catholic population has played a major role in our churches in this country. About 20 million white Catholics have stopped self-identifying as such in recent decades. 20 million, that's a big number. That, in some ways, has led also to the accelerated aging of the white Catholic population in this country. The median age for Latinos in the United States of America is 29. The median age for Asians is 32. The median age for Black people in the United States of America is 35. The median age for white Catholics is 55. So, with the aging of the population and the exodus from the Catholic Church, parishes, schools, universities, and other structures are experiencing the dwindling of resources all across. That should not be a surprise. We have lost more than 8,000 Catholic schools of the 13,000 plus that we had built. We have closed nearly 4,000 Catholic parishes in the United States of America. Our seminaries and our houses of religious formation struggle to welcome new members. The median age of sisters in the United States of America is 73. The median age of priests is 65, 68 if you are in the Northeast. A third of Catholic colleges and universities are in peril to be closed within the next decade. Besides this, we have the effects of political and ideological polarization that is tearing our families apart, our communities, and how we also present ourselves in the larger society. Such polarization is manifested both intra and extra-ecclesially. The cultural demographic map of the United States of America is changing, and it's changing fast. As of 2015, most Catholics in the United States of America live not in the Northeast or the Midwest, as it used to be the case for 2 centuries. Now they live in the South and the West, primarily because of the Hispanic and Asian presence. Spaces. As Hispanic, Asian, Black, and Native Americans grow in numbers, we encounter a redefinition of priorities. Priorities at the pastoral level, at the educational level, at the theological level. the emergence of the Hispanic Catholic population in particular has triggered what many are calling the Hispanization of American Catholicism. Today, American Catholicism has more in common with Latin America and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean than what it has in common with Europe as it used to be. How American Catholics have responded and need to respond to this is largely debated. Peter Steinfeld, a few years ago, indicated or suggested that American Catholics are a people adrift before all these dynamics. Some believe that we have lost our compass and that the best way for us to return to our horizon is retrieving into the small communities and being super faithful. Some believe that we have become too Americanized, that there is little of our Catholic identity that could be rescued as we are today, and we need to return to some past, or we need to take advantage of the Catholicism that immigrant communities are bringing, which help us to reminisce about that older Catholicism. Others are saying that because of the diversification of Catholicism, American Catholics actually are less American than they have ever been. And that's the case of political scientist Samuel Huntington, who claims that what defines American identity is 1, being white, 2, being Protestant, 3, speaking English. Therefore, being Hispanic is the worst thing that has happened to the United States. Mostly Spanish-speaking, being Catholic, and not being white. Dear friends, one thing is clear. The American Catholic experience of the 1920s, 1940s, or even the 1960s is not that of the 1920s, of the 2020s. And we must contend with that reality. And where do we do that? In the spaces where Catholicism is growing and flourishing today. And that, in most parts of the United States of America, is the culturally diverse communities. In a culturally diverse church, we need to avoid reading the tensions of our day with a hermeneutic of nostalgia, or one of restoration of the old ways, or even one of resistance for the sake of resistance. We are invited into new and fresher ways of being church that are not coming from positions of power, that are not coming from within our communities many times, but that are coming through the margins or from the margins of society, from the margins of our own nation, from the borders of our own nation, and from the margins of our own church. We need to listen to the stories of the people that today call the Catholic Church home: immigrants, refugees, the elderly, people who have been displaced, people who are seeing their communities being lost or seeing their communities being closed. And that affects us all: white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American. In the context of cultural diversity, as we look at the new spaces, we need to start asking ourselves, whose parishes are these? Whose communities are these? Whose Catholic schools are these? Whose Catholic universities are these? That requires revisiting concepts of hospitality that assume that a particular group owns the resources or owns these spaces and decides whether to welcome or not the next group that is coming behind. It requires a sense of hospitality in which most likely today, Black immigrants or Hispanic immigrants or Asian immigrants and their children are welcoming those communities that for centuries or for many decades have been part of our communities. We need fresher ecclesiological images that reflect the spaces in which the new way of being American Catholic is being forged. I want to offer 5 of these images, which I believe hold promise. The first image is the Mestizo Church, as Father and theologian Virgilio Elizondo would argue. It is an ecclesiology. This image points to an ecclesiology in which people from different ways of life and different Catholic experiences come, they merge, they contribute who they are, and in the process become something new. In a Mestizo church, we all lose something, we all gain something. Second, a borderland church. An ecclesiology of borderlands, as Roberto Goizueta would suggest, is an ecclesiology that constantly pays attention to the margins and to the liminal space where the Holy Spirit is forging a new way of being church. In the borderland church, people cross boundaries, people tell stories, people cross experiences that give them life, but they also share experiences of horror and even terror. An ecclesiology of Madang, that is a Korean category, which is proposed by theologian Hee-sung Hwang. Dr. Hwang argues that the Madang offers a new ecclesiology that gives us the opportunity to imagine ourselves together, sharing stories, eating together, caring for one another. The Madang is the space in Korean houses, old houses. Perhaps you have seen them also in the southern part of the United States. I haven't seen them much in the Northeast, but the Madang is the old houses. Normally houses in Korea, old houses were built in a square way or rectangular way, and in the middle there is a big space where people would put chairs, they would put tables, and the entire family, friends, neighbors would come into the house and they would be welcome. People would do art, people would sing, people would spend the entire day in these spaces of community. A Madang ecclesiology is an ecclesiology that doesn't dwell on the differences or on the losses, but on the possibilities of being together. We could also think of an ecclesiology of Sankofa. An ecclesiology of Sankofa building on the African term Sankofa, which is common in the Akan tribe in Ghana. The term means it is not taboo to seek what is at risk of being forgotten. In other words, it is an invitation to delve deeper into one's communal history as we seek to move forward. A theology or an ecclesiology of Sankofa is an invitation to listen and listen attentively to the stories that shape people's lives, that shape how people have come to understand the work of God in their lives. And finally, a church of encuentro, or a church of encounter, which is a category that is popular and common in the Latino Catholic community. Encuentro, which is a process that began in 1972, and the last time it took place was in 2018, is an opportunity for the church to come together, to sit down, to listen, to think together, to pray, and to listen again. It is an exercise of synodality in many ways. It is only, as a matter of fact, in this context of synodality where we will find the spaces that will help us deal with the many tensions of identifying who we are as Catholics in this country. It is in all these spaces, Mestizo Church, Borderland Church, Madang Church, Sankofa Church, Synodality or Encuentro Church, where American Catholicism is being forged today, and fresher and more dynamic approaches to being church are emerging. Of course, there are tensions, but those tensions are the result of the kairos that signals the dawn of a new ecclesiological moment. This is a moment that we are invited to embrace with open minds and hearts, trusting that God's grace, through the work of the Holy Spirit, will always continue to renew God's church. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to grab the mic up here. I need to encourage people who are watching at home that you can put a question by tapping the top of your screen. My friend Tommy is going to go over here to where do I have any questions from the online, Aaron? Not yet. Okay, when they do, Tommy's right there. We've just heard a really amazing unpacking of both the history of our country, the way in which immigrant churches flourished, the way in which tensions about being Catholic and American came into tension. And now I'd like to ask you what your questions are for Professor Ospino tonight. I'm coming. Would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Pat Cleary.
Okay.
I'm from England. And I'm wondering, with the sharing of and integrating of all the nations and whatnot, how about, is there going to be equality with the sexes? Can we look forward to some women priests and a bit more sharing in the church?
I like this question. I'm just saying. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, I mean, this is a topic that I did not address directly in this lecture. My focus has been primarily cultural, demographic, and ecclesiological. But I believe that there are signs that point to conversations in that regard, for instance, in the context of synodality, or in the context of more openness to to questions of difference and questions of agency in the life of the church. So I think that we are developing the language that may lead us into fuller participation of women in the life of the church. On the other hand, I'm going to be here. This is going to be a half full, half empty glass answer, okay? Many of the communities that are arriving in the United States of America, particularly from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, do not share the same ecclesiological hopes that we have in the United States. They are not sharing the questions about women deacons or women's ordination or laity in governance of the church and so on. And one of the main reasons is not because they feel that this is not important. It's simply because many of these communities are on survival mode. Think about, for instance, of the fact that half of immigrant Catholics immigrant Catholics from Asia, or half of Asian Catholics in the United States of America are immigrants. These are people are basically settling down. Think of the fact that 9 million Hispanic Catholics, most of them, 9 million Hispanics, most of them Catholic, are undocumented. These people are on a survival mode, trying to find their way in the shadows of our own society. So a question like the one you have raised is a question that is not top of their priority. Top of their priority is, how do we become legalized? How do I feed my family? How do I find my space in a community? Most priests in the United States of America who are Hispanic are foreign-born. 85% of priests are foreign-born. So the question for the Latino community at this point, priority number one is not equality of genders at the level of ordained priesthood, is how do we start even planting the idea of ordained priesthood in our own children in the next generation. So there is hope, but at the same time, there is a lot of work to do, with these communities. And let's keep in mind that those are the communities that are eventually giving life to parishes nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you. These things are true. And U.S. Catholics are 6% of global Catholicism.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a global church, right? Did you have a question? Please. And introduce yourself, please.
My name is Isabel Scranyars. I'm a freshman nursing student here at Fairfield. You mentioned how decades ago that parishes had been made for specific nationalities, for instance, like built by Italians for the Italians.
Mm-hmm.
Did the different parishes have conflicting values on the essence of the Catholic faith, or like any other conflicts that may have arose?
Thank you for your question, Isabel. Well, my Irish friends tells me that the best type of Catholicism that has ever existed is Irish Catholicism, But the Italians will say something similar. So, in essence, doctrinally, they were pretty much on the same boat. They were fine with the sacraments. They were fine with the scriptures. They were fine. There were a few exceptions, and I'll mention two of them. Polish Catholics at some point thought about actually starting a whole separate church in this country, and they called it the Polish National Catholic Church. And they actually got to do that. A few parishes were established, in the name of the national. So in a sense, they segregated, they separated. The Germans also tried to do that. German Catholics, said, why do we need the rest of the Catholic community in America when we can do it on our own? And they actually proposed that idea of becoming a German national church. That never panned out, but for the Polish it did, although it didn't grow that much. So in general, these communities had differences, but most of the differences were cultural. They were socioeconomic. For instance, when the Italians arrived, the Irish had already been in the country for more than a century, and they had already settled, become more influential. Most of the bishops were Irish. So it was more at the practical level where you would see those differences. But in terms of the Catholicism per se, I haven't read much about major differences. Thank you for asking that.
Okay. Briley, do you have a question? Yes. Okay, if you would introduce yourself, and Tommy, you can scan over there and see if you have any questions from your side of the room.
Hi, my name is Briley Reddy. I'm also a freshman nursing major here at Fairfield. And during your presentation, I found it very interesting when you were speaking about the history of Catholicism and how it began as an immigrant religion, but it ended up flourishing and growing despite many of the challenges that you were speaking about. So my question is, based off of that, do you believe that there will be more challenges in the future that will either help unite believers together or cause a downfall in the number of Catholic followers? And if so, what could the challenges be, and how could people come together as a whole and help the faith grow?
Until the Lord Jesus Christ returns, we will be having many of those challenges. So I'm not going to lie to you, but we will continue to have challenges as we build church. As I was saying towards the end of the lecture, right now we're in the midst of a major transition. And that transition is mindful that 55% of white Catholics that the median age of white Catholics is 55. By the middle of the 20th century, that's only 30 years from now, okay, less than that, white Catholics are gonna be in this country maybe 25% of the entire Catholic population, 20%. And one of the challenges that we have is that the white Catholic population is practically footing, or shouldering the support of most of the structures that we have in this country. At all levels, financially, human resources, ministry, even theologically. So one of the challenges that we have into the future, and it's urgent, and this is something that, for instance, I raise in other lectures and presentations, is that we need to start fostering a new generation of pastoral leaders from the Latino community, from the Asian community, you know? And the best way to assess how well we are doing is when we look around, for instance, you know? When we look around, we need to say, where are the Asian students? Where are the Hispanic students? Where are the black students in our Catholic schools, in our Catholic universities, in our Catholic seminaries, in our Catholic organizations? Because without those leaders, it's going to be difficult. Another aspect to keep in mind is that, I didn't mention this in the presentation, but white Catholics are superbly educated, superbly well educated, okay? 55% of white Catholics holds at least a 4-year college degree, okay? It's the second most educated group in this nation after the Jewish community. So when you're highly educated, you get access to resources, financial, you can serve in leadership, and you can have a lot of priests and vowed religious and so on. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that the next body that is going to be inheriting positions of service, or should be inheriting positions of service, is the Latino community. Yet, only 16% of Hispanic adults has a college level degree or a 4-year college degree. And that literally, reduces the pool of potential leaders. But not only that, it also reduces the ability of the Latino community to support a beautiful university like this one, no? And I think about the institution where I teach, into the future. Most likely it's going to be the Hispanic community that is going to support Boston College. But if our people, our Latinos, don't go to Catholic schools, if they don't go to college, if they don't graduate, and if they don't become professional, we will not be able to sustain these services, these institutions, those parishes, and then we're going to be in trouble. So that's why we need to invest in education and the formation of those next generations. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, please, please. And just give me your name, okay?
Okay. My name is Kathy Coyne, and the thing that I've witnessed, in the blending of the cultures, my sister married an Italian, which was a big deal in 1960s to my Irish heritage. But we all got through it. My parents, that generation, all got through it, and she opened the doors for lots of people. Point one. But the other thing, in religious education over the years, I think the young American boys are dumbfounded. What do you mean you can't be a priest?
Yes.
That the gender thing, as people come in and they become American, they kind of think maybe we should have equality that we don't see in the church. Yep. In the same way, unless you want to work for.
There are many questions that remain in search of a credible answer for the younger generation today. That's one of, and it is precisely because our either inability or because of the rigidity of our current convictions that many young people are actually walking away from Catholicism, you have named equality in terms of leadership. As an educator, I am going to go even to a more elemental aspect, How do we teach the relationship between faith and science? As simple as that. Why is that important? Because in the United States, the average age in which a young person lives or stops self-identifying as Catholic is 13. And And when these young people are interviewed, and there are plenty of studies on that, when they are interviewed and asked, why don't you want to remain Catholic? And they say, because I don't see any reconciliation between the faith that I hear on Sundays in my church and the science that I'm receiving in my school. So there's so many dynamics that exist in our parish, in our church, that require having open conversations. I am optimistic. I'm optimistic with the process of a synodal church. I think that I'm not expecting solutions from Rome, and if anyone who expects solutions from Rome, you may be wasting your time, But I think that it's not about the solutions to these issues. I think that what I'm expecting is that we continue to be invited into creating the spaces for these dialogues and these conversations, and that brings me hope, because like politics, pastoral life at the end of the day is local. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say one thing before we close here, is that you've been a wonderful audience tonight, and I have good news for you. What I have arranged is that 1 year from now, are you going to come back? Okay. 1 year from now, I've arranged for Professor Ospino to revisit Fairfield University and speak to us, seeing as how he's laid out some of the history and the narrative that the Catholic Church is facing. He will come back 1 year from now. Wow, is anything going to happen in this year? Will we finish the synod? Will we have an interim report and have a conversation about the future of the church? Perhaps there will be an election in the United States. I'm just saying that these cultural themes are going to come up and are going to be very greatly discussed. And 1 year from now, I look forward to welcoming Professor Ospino back to talk to us further about the American church experience. Let's thank him for his talk tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.